Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited for my guest today. You are listening to a 100% on, not in your business, where we talk to business owners about the struggles and challenges they've had in their own personal and professional life, making that transition from working in their business, kind of being in the weeds in the day-to-day, to really leveling up so that they can work on their business. Because when they can work on their business, they can grow their customer count, grow their revenue, develop their employees, and ultimately achieve the vision for the business that they had set out for. Today, I'm really excited. I have Taylor Ho. He is the Chief Happiness Officer with APM Help, and a fantastic story of a business owner that was literally in the weeds. You were employee one, and now you've grown to over 150 employees. Taylor, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve, and would love to inspire others to do the same.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, I teased them just a little bit. So you were employee one, and now there's 150. How did that all transpire? Tell us a little bit about APM Help and your story, starting the business, your experience as employee one, and now your experience as that Chief Happiness Officer.
Sure. Well, I think all interesting stories start with, one of the reasons why I started the business was money. No, it was mainly actually, I'd always done kind of startups. I was a serial entrepreneur that unfortunately did not make very much money. And so I had always in the back kind of a side hustle thing. I'd always been consulting because I used to work at a software company called Appfolio. They're an accounting software / property management software for the property management industry. And essentially I was an expert at the software, or knew it really, really, really well, and had property management companies contact me outside just to say, hey, we'd love to have you help out. And I guess not the straw that broke the camel's back, but like the kick in the butt per se was early 2017, my wife told me that she was pregnant and we were going to have our first kid. And so I was like, oh crap, like I have to make real money now. And so quite literally, like in that first half of 2017, like reevaluated just my whole life and was just like, yeah, although I don't necessarily know if this is going to be scalable, but the lowest hanging fruit right now is I have unlimited, unsatiable demand for people who, property management companies who are asking for my help, right? Mm-hmm. And so, ultimately got to the point where I was doing nonstop 80 hours a week at our billable rates, and I was making fantastic money, but I was at the point where it's just like, this isn't sustainable. Like I'd finish every day and I'd just be dead, brain dead, just don't talk to me. Like that was it. And so I was absolutely working in the business, right? Like I was the business. It was me and only me, and I was doing everything, right? Sales, marketing, forums, chatting with clients, talking to prospects, trying to understand, like how could I turn myself? And I think this was a very interesting thing of like, because I had done tech startups or product-based companies or software companies, I'd always thought about, well, how can I eventually productize myself? Mm-hmm. Right? Because I knew from day one, this was not going to be sustainable. And essentially, happened to, I think with all great companies or stories, I guess, like, what was interesting was our own clients, or my clients at the time, even though I had cleaned up their books, helped them, got them on the straight and narrow, a few months later, they would come back to me with the same problems. And so we eventually realized that, this was just a systemic issue in our industry of, our industry tends to have a really hard problem attracting, retaining, training, and growing with bookkeepers or back office personnel, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was something where, the light bulb really, shone or turned on when I had one of our clients come back and was like, look, Taylor, we can't keep doing this, right? We paid you a ton of money to train our new bookkeeper, and 3 months later, they're gone. A bigger fish poached them, right? Like, and now we're back to square one. They're dealing with turnover. They're all small mom and pops too. And so they're just like, Taylor, what if we paid you what we would pay our accounting team or our accountant or bookkeeper to just have peace of mind that our books are clean, right? That everything's being done correctly, it's straight, it's being done in real time, or relatively speaking real time, you're reconciling all this kind of great stuff. And that was finally like, I remember that moment, I was like, huh, I wonder if I can actually do this. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to jump that chasm, because then it's like, oh man, now I'm just someone's bookkeeper,
Yeah.
right? Versus, like, the other side is like, I'm someone's consultant, right? Where it's like consultant sounds, more sexy, or than a bookkeeper per se. But I was like, but this is interesting. And I think the biggest thing was that I got very lucky here. My first client who offered me this, they were paying their accounting team or bookkeeping team over 7,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
Right. So for me, I was like, well, my goal was always just, try to make 10 grand a month, and I'm comfortable. I have one client that's coming in and asking me, or willing to pay me 7 grand of that to do their books. And so ultimately went down that rabbit hole, signed my first recurring bookkeeping client in July of 2017. And here we are in May of 2021 after a pandemic, and we count over 1,000 companies as clients today.
Wow.
Right. And so, and yeah, I mean, I went from myself to, today we have over 150 full-time, right? And we don't only do just books, but I mean, it's the same model. Like, it's pretty much small mom and pops in our industry of property management. It's really hard for them to retain, hire, keep, train great back office personnel. And so, we come in as their scalable back office, right? And primarily that is bookkeeping.
Right, right. Well, looking back at, you got that first one consistent recurring revenue, and then the second one. What
Yeah.
started to happen in your business where the second, then the third, then the fourth, and you realized, oh, I can't continue to support all of these, and now you needed to start to build a staff. Do you remember what that experience was like for you?
I do. It was, I always knew that I would, yeah, I had to get to the point where I was working on the business and not in it, right? So I was methodically, the second I brought on like that second, third, and fourth client, where like it was like, okay, this is actually a thing now, right? Once I realized that, I immediately started proactively hiring. I took every single penny of extra money outside of like, and I've been very fortunate. My wife has been able to support us, as a family. She has a stable, oil and gas company job, right? So like all that kind of, like, I was able to take these kinds of risks, and she enabled me to effectively take all of the extra free cash flow we had to go and, hire people. So I remember my first key hire was same thing, like a software expert from the same company at Folio. And literally the second I passed like 10,000 monthly recurring, which, essentially was, paying for me and someone else per se, I immediately took, that extra money and allocated 5 grand of it to the first hire. Right. And in that first hire, then I also hired another 2 people who were like bookkeepers. But pretty much like outside of a nominal amount of money that I paid myself, and at the time I had a partner who took half of everything else, like it was pretty much break even. It was just every cent of free cash flow from consulting, from recurring, everything. We were just, all right, we were stair stepping, right? It's like we're now doing 15,000 monthly recurring. Okay, that means I can hire 3 people at 5,000 a month, right? So we would go and have 2 and be looking for our fifth or third one, because we know we're going to keep adding more revenue. And we just kind of try our best to keep stair stepping. And what we were doing at the time was essentially building capacity, right? So every one person we brought on, right, like yes, they may have cost us 5 grand, but they could handle way more than just 5 grand in recurring revenue.
Right.
And so we eventually got to the point where as we started scaling, we were pretty comfortably doing every new hire we brought on within 2 to 3 months, they were handling 15,000 in monthly recurring. So that enabled us to then really start understanding like, okay, like each person we bring on is 15K monthly. So if they cost us 4, 5, 6,000 a month, then there's excess there that we can keep rolling, keep growing. So
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you were transitioning into the guy that was behind the keyboard to the guy that now is scaling the business and hiring the employees and doing the math, right? Figuring out when is the right time to pull the trigger on the next one. And I
Yeah.
bet sales and marketing didn't slow down. It probably sped up for you.
Yeah. It did. And that's been a challenge, right? Like, you know, sales and marketing for quite some time, I think for the first 2 years was essentially myself and one other guy,
Hmm.
right? And we eventually got to the point where, I don't want to say this in my industry, but it's like shooting, like salespeople like to use shooting fish in a barrel kind of thing. Like we got it to the point where like it was pretty like it's the same pitch. Our consult's a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same value prop. Everything is the same now, right? And at that point, it was interesting because um, at the time we still had the ability to hire as well, like actual account managers to do the work. And so, we were able to stair step pretty well, right? Granted, I think we had plenty of small business challenges. We had cash flow issues, right? I remember not taking salary myself early on, at least for quite a few months, because I was trying to maintain hiring people while making sure like there's enough capacity for sales, right?
Right.
And like stair stepping as best I could. But I mean, all small businesses as they grow quickly, right? Like you're going to go through these challenges. I mean, I think from 27 each year for the first 3 years, we grew over 100% each year. And so it was extremely hard to like match supply with demand.
Right. 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 Well,
Yeah.
so now your role is vastly different. Explain a little bit more about your role now versus obviously what it was back then.
Sure. Well, my official title is the Chief Happiness Officer, right? And whenever people ask me like, what does that really mean? I like to say there's really two people per se, or two audiences that I'm responsible for, right? At the end of the day, my responsibility is our client happiness, client success, right? So if anything were to happen with any of our clients, like technically speaking, they can always come to me, and my job is to make sure they're happy, right? And secondly, our own employees, every single one of our staff, they know I have a virtual open door policy, right? Like at any time, if for whatever reason anything's happening, right, like they can reach out, and we will try our best to make sure they have everything they need, they're successful, they're happy as well, right? And obviously that comes with its own challenges, but we definitely try our best.
Right, right. One of the things I hear from a lot of my guests is at some point they realize they've got to release control. Now, for you, it was kind of you were forced because customers were coming and you just realized you can't do them all. And so you started
Sure.
to hire account managers. But now you may be at that point because you're probably hiring other leadership to run parts of the business. How are you facing that challenge of kind of releasing control, but at the same time empowering those team members to achieve the goals that you have for APM Help and ultimately make customers and employees happy?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a multifaceted question and answer. I we're absolutely at the point where I'm now hiring for other management and leadership positions. Most recently, for example, we quite literally, as of last night, brought on our actual like a controller, right? Like a junior, like eventual like CFO style kind of person,
Right.
right? And like this hire, actually, we got introduced to him more than almost 2 years ago, right? He's the husband of one of our other key employees we had, who went off and jumped to another company, but we had always remained in touch. He had actually been an accountant. He had his own firm. He sold that firm, right, and worked for a year at the acquiring company, and just had a kid. His wife messaged me as like, "Hey, I see my husband, job searching," right? And we caught up, and I was like, actually, my other leadership team members have said like, we really need to bring in someone with strong financial like background, right?
Mhm.
Like, although we are an accounting firm and we do a lot of accounting for our own clients, like it's hard. It's really hard to maintain that kind of stuff. And we do a different flavor of like trust, property based or portfolio based trust accounting and bookkeeping. So
Right.
it is quite different from company financials and recurring and analyzing cohort and churn and LTV and MRR. And if any of you guys have no idea what these acronyms are, absolutely happy. You should Google them. But but like these are all things that like I wouldn't even be able to call myself an expert at them, right? And so, one, we've definitely been able to hire or keeping in touch with just people, right? Like in general, right? Like we've had a lot of success in just maintaining those relationships and eventually either getting really great intros or hiring straight from our network. I wouldn't say extremely active, but I do try to stay relatively involved in different startup communities. Mm-hmm. So with a prior company, we were a Capital Factory company. So we're in the Capital Factory, like Slack stuff. Same thing, prior company, we were a 500 startups incubator company or accelerator company. Mm-hmm. And so we're still pretty active in those kinds of communities as well. And so being able to reach out, like I've met some amazing founders and stayed in touch with quite a few of them. And sometimes as it relates to like building technology, right? Like some of our core tech was actually built by a fellow founder who was a CTO at a separate startup that eventually failed, right? Mm-hmm. And like just staying in touch. And he needed work, I needed a problem to be resolved with tech, and he built us an amazing Chrome extension that now like powers pretty much everything that we do. Oh, wow. Right? And so I think those are very, very interesting. Your question specifically around like giving up control and whatnot, I think we've been very lucky because we haven't necessarily had to hire like straight from a job pool or job applicant pool. Like we haven't had to recruit these specific kinds of like blast out to put a job listing. We've simply reached out to our networks and been lucky enough to find potentially really great fits. And absolutely having great advisors, right? Is extremely important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the power of networks. And so, yeah, are you giving up control? Sure, but you're doing it in a way where you're getting trusted employees to be able to take that portion of your business on. And because they came from your network, because you have relationships with them maybe in the past, you can immediately kind of plug and play them and know that they're going to deliver. So that's a great way to approach it. Kind of leverage your networks for sure.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, early on, right, when we were going through some pretty explosive growth, like we were hiring 3 to 5 people a month kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like I was same thing, very lucky to have employees or staff that like kind of stepped up, right? Like they stepped up, they took initiative, and here they are today. Like one of my employees, Marie, she was our probably around the like number 20th hire. Mm-hmm. And now she's actually one of our youngest employees too. And she's now actually our VP of all of our services. Oh, awesome. Right. And it was primarily because she saw and recognized that there was a gap in management. Although I may be a chief happiness officer, right? Like I understand that I may not be the best people manager, right? And I think that's also like different cultures, different kinds of people, right? Like I'm definitely not the micromanaging kind of manager. I'm very much so if I trust you, and I believe that you can do this, like I'm a hands-off kind of manager, right? But that's not the management style that everyone needs or wants, right? And so there was clearly a gap. She stepped in to fill that, and I mean, here we are, 130 people more later, right? And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a ride. You roll with the punches, but if you surround yourself with great people, talented people who problem solvers, right? People who aren't scared, right? That especially not scared of change, right? Especially at a young company, like you got to be able to roll with the punches, and extremely lucky to be able to say that we were able to.
Well, yeah, I mean, y'all are a small, thriving company, and then you're servicing small businesses as well. So, I mean, gosh, the change is just inevitable in both of those type of scenarios. Well, you had mentioned something about your leadership style, and I think just knowing you, that has kind of influenced the way that you structured your culture. You and I were talking a little bit before about your 100% remote, and you structured the comp in a certain way to kind of minimize the need for management oversight. Not that you don't have it, but you don't have multiple layers. You want to talk a little bit about how your leadership style created that culture and how it drives and motivates the employees?
Sure. So, and to confirm what Steve had said, right? We were remote pre-COVID, right? So we have never had an office. We've every single employee of ours has always worked from home. Now, with that, we do swank out the home offices of all of our staff per se, but beyond that, like that comes with its own challenges, right? Obviously, a lot of people now are kind of like, oh, remote work, like we know how to do it now. We all have done it, right? Like, no, I think it's still different when right now you're doing it, but everyone kind of feels like it's going to go back to normal per se, or what it was before. Whereas we've truly never, like, we make hires. Every day, quite frank, every week we're hiring people that we've never seen before, right? Outside of a video conference,
Right.
right? And that obviously poses its own challenges as it relates to the management style or the culture that I've kind of put in because of the remote style, like due to the remote nature and the whole mantra of like, if you're in a meeting, you're not working kind of thing. And my own personal maybe downfall or shortcomings here of just not being a very good, like, let me oversee everything kind of manager, right? Like, we've evolved our culture to be, like, very, we don't need tons of managers per se to look over everything. And one of the specific things that I harp on a lot is how I designed our comp structure. For every single employee or staff at my company, there is some ability for them to make some kind of bonus, right? And it's calculated every month. Some are quarterly, but usually it's every month and then paid out quarterly or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always tied to some kind of key metric that employee is responsible for or has full control over, right? And so, like, that's almost in and of itself a review mechanism, right? Not saying, look, it's not for everyone, right? Some people, like, everyone wants to make more money. Let's put it that way, right? Everyone wants to make more money, but depending on who they are, trying to attain that more money or that bonus or extra money may be extremely draining for people, right? And so and this is actually one of those things that, like, we've had to really take a step back and, like, reevaluate and see, like, is this really sustainable long term as well? And I think eventually we're going to move to a hybrid approach, but, like, early on, where we're growing extremely fast and there is no middle management, right? Like, literally, we had people who would join us and 3 months later they technically were like senior people, right? Like, because there's like now 10 more people that have joined, right? Like, in those kinds of styles, like, there's not room or time to train or whatnot. And so I put a lot of thought into, how do I design a comp structure that, technically speaking, I can tell if you're performing, right, well, or just normally, based on how much we've paid you, right? And technically speaking, that's also their own review, right? Like, instead of having to, at the time, like, instead of having to do weekly one-on-ones or check-ins with every single employee, like, I wasn't able to do that. I was on sales calls, right? Like, I was on consults and things. And so it was something that was the intent. Now, here we are today. Don't get me wrong. We've now entered, like, more of a hybrid approach, because we also realize, not everyone operates or can operate or thrive in that kind of environment either, right? So, and I think that's something, every company is going to evolve and change, and there's market dynamics that are changing too. People are more comfortable with remote work, right? But that also means, like, we have a bigger pool of people, but some of them have been working 30 years at big corporate America, right? For them, they're just like, huh? what do you mean there's a monthly bonus thing? Like, I just pay me, what I should earn, and every year, like I'll get like a increase or something, and that increase or bonus or raise is based on my performance, and I'm happy, right? Like,
Yeah.
don't dangle these carrots in front of me. Because of course, if you dangle it, they're going to want it, right? But
Yeah.
then,
Right.
like that may lead to burnout and a bad balance of work-life balance and all this. So lots of challenges, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Right.
we are still maintaining some semblance of, everyone has a key metric that like, equates to relative performance, and we do still pay monthly, or calculate monthly and pay quarterly bonuses.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that's not a fit for everyone. If you're accustomed to just that flat salary and that 3% every year, and it makes it look like you're holding something back, but you're not. You're driving the performance and the culture that you want. And so,
Yeah.
hiring employees is more about fit anyways than skill set and background. And so
Sure.
I bet you probably screen for that up front. Um, this has been fantastic. Thank you for joining me today. So you mentioned that you're still very connected to just the network of other startups. As you talk with other business owners that might be in the space you were 4 years ago, what's one or two pieces of advice that you see yourself giving to them on a regular basis and you want to share with the audience today?
You know, I I remember being in the position where I was even before this current company, where it's like everyone talks about being able to leverage advisors or these networks, right? And I remember at the time, especially when you're straight out of college kind of thing, it's like, what do you talk like? I don't know anyone, right? Like, how do you build this network, right? Where do you even get started? Honestly, I mean, it it's awkward, especially if it's not your personality type to go mingle and network, but like, if this is if being a business owner is what you want to do, honestly, just going to a local networking kind of, event, just starting there, you never know who you're going to run into,
Right.
right? And yes, some of them may be, not that valuable, right? But like, I got to the point where, early on, like, I try to go to at least one a month,
Mhm.
right, kind of thing. Until like I eventually got to the point where it's like, because when you go there, you're meeting other founders, other business owners. You get to hear their struggles. You get to hear their business models. You get to learn a ton, right? And if you're just getting into it, like, just listening also helps you better understand like what you want to do, where you want to go, what you aspire to be, right? And I think the other thing is like, if you like want to stay in touch with someone, you have to take the initiative,
Mhm.
right? Like, there's so many people who, they'll go to whatever conference thing, and some famous person, goes up and speaks, and there's like a line to go talk to them afterwards, right? And everyone's like, oh, well, here's my business card, right? Like, reach out to me.
Right.
That person's not going to reach out to you. Yeah, they're gonna. I'm sorry, but like, they're gonna take those business cards, and the second they walk out the door, they're gonna throw in the trash,
Yeah.
right? But like, how what I realized was like, and I actually kind of do this. Granted, like, because I go to conferences, you kind of have to have cards, but like, I have a rule myself where if I want to truly stay in touch with someone, I ask for their information right then and there. And I either send them a text message or an email, or I connect with them and I send them some kind of message. Otherwise, I can show you tons of stacks of business cards that I've never touched once I got home,
Right.
right? Like, especially when you got kids and other distractions, right? Like, but as a initial, when you're starting up and stuff, you got to take the initiative, right? I've also cold emailed other founders and other people who you would never believe would answer or respond, right?
Right.
But if you actually take the time to craft, not a spammy email, right, but like a legitimate, like, hey, put yourself out there. I have this problem. I've seen whatever. I've seen you guys. You've talked about these kinds of topics. right? Like show that you've done some research into them versus just like, you're a famous person,
Yeah.
right? Like, no, like actually like, like spend some time researching them and put that in there. And at least founders like me, we're inbox zero, right? What does that mean? That means I don't have 1,000 unread emails. That means I have zero unread. That means I read every single email.
Right.
Right. And so, I will get emails from, of course, a lot of, SDR salespeople trying to get in my, try to get in, maybe not slide into my DMs, slide into my inbox.
Right.
And like, and maybe this is weird to me, but like sometimes I'll actually critique them. I'll be like, look, I would have responded to you, right? Like legitimately, but like, here's some of the reasons why I'm not going to take this very seriously, right? And it's grammar, it's length of email, right? Like, like but sometimes like I've had some where it's like, they especially requesting jobs, right? Like internships, things like that. They'll just be like, hey, I see you have a position open. I don't think I'm what you're looking for specific for that role, but I like what your company's doing. And, if you have anything, anything available, right, that potentially could be a good fit, I'd love to connect, right? They'll include like a cover letter or some kind of resume or something like that. And again, I'm inbox zero. I read everything. At least I'll open the attachment, right? Versus, like hand me a business card. I'm sorry, right? But like, I'm not going to reach back out to you,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so I think long story short, right? Take initiative. Don't be scared. Take initiative, but be respectful of other people's time as well.
Right. And be genuine. I mean, we
Oh
want to
yeah,
connect with other humans. We don't want to be sold to and told what to do. We just want to connect with other genuine humans that want to do good things. So
yeah,
yeah, your point about let them know that you've learned a little bit about them and what their background is and why that background is important to what you're reaching out for. I mean, maybe it's help,
right.
maybe it's a job, something to that matter. So that's very good advice. And yes, getting out and starting to network is, if that's not your personality type, can be really difficult. And I
Mhm.
always encourage people, when you go to those events, at least half of the people there are like you.
Oh yeah.
You're
Oh,
uncomfortable.
90% of the people
How
are
many?
like you.
How many?
90%.
Well,
Oh,
I'm
greater than
thinking,
90%.
50% extrovert, 50% of us are
Ah,
introverts.
fine.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you might be right. 90% are uncomfortable. So everyone's there is uncomfortable, and they just want to get to know other individuals. So if you do that well and genuinely, then they're open and welcome to talk with you.
Exactly.
Taylor, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. Anything you'd like to leave the guest?
Uh, I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, if I can be of help or assistance to anyone, obviously, like this podcast and this show per se is not specifically in my industry, but I mean, look, I'm in Houston, right? I try to support the community as much as I can, right? I invest in companies or startups, right? Like, don't spam me. Be mindful, but if anyone needs help, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to at least read the email, and if it's genuine enough, I'll respond.
And how would people get in contact with you?
I'm going to leave this one pretty open-ended. There are a gazillion ways to get in contact with people. So show me you've done a little bit of research. My name is
I like it.
Taylor. HOU is my last name. You can find me on anywhere, essentially, right? Not saying I'm going to respond, but again, if you're either creative enough or genuine enough, I will most likely respond.
You know what? I'm gonna use that. I like that. I like that approach. Well, cool.
I mean, if you make it too easy, right? Like it's just like, like it's like follow me. What does that mean? I don't
Right,
know.
right.
Like, yeah,
Well, I like the approach. Well, Taylor, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
cool. Thanks, Steve. Likewise.